Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. Patch 11.17, the big catch-up update ahead of Season 3 content is releasing in just a handful of days or possibly tomorrow, depending when you're watching this video. But this update is one of those 0.7 updates that we've seen in the past that brings with it a couple of catch-up components, especially when it comes to leveling or catching up gear ahead of a brand new season. It also does bring in some new power gains for max level players, as well as some other improvements to the content of the game. But it also is bringing a lot of little updates, quality of life improvements, slight little changes, new little additions, and even slight improvements to reward structures of certain existing content that sadly won't even be appearing on the official patch notes. Little things like a unique new pet that marksman hunters will have access to instead of the spotter eagle, how you can earn more time war badges through time walking dungeons, and even more alt-friendly components being added to delve gearing, plus a number of other items which I wanted to catalog in today's video. So this is going to be all of the small features the majority of players will miss for the patch 11.17. As always, if you guys want to keep up with regular updates for War Within or potentially for future upcoming major updates like 11.2, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right in. So one of the little rewards that a lot of players do miss out on actually will come from time walking dungeons, as dungeons are getting better rewards. Not necessarily from gear, even though that is being upgraded, but there's going to be a lot better currencies from time walking instances specifically. Now, time walking dungeons actually going through a bit of a scaling with 11.17, where they're giving enemies a little bit more health and a little bit more damage, and the same thing goes for boss fights. And this is going to be especially evident for players that are walking into these dungeons at max level and with really good gear. You're gonna notice that bosses and enemies are not falling apart within just a handful of globals, as they technically have been made a little bit tougher. Also, they decided to fix some of that level scaling for enchants, gems, and other power sources from lower level characters. So if you had yourself a tweaked out character with some crazy scaling, they'll likely see that scaling and that power from those items be softened a little bit. We did get to test out the time walking dungeons over on the PTR a while back, and we did have a Rested Druid who ran a healing damage build, basically go into Rested Druid, use intellect scaling while in cat form, and it allows that intellect to power up that cat form for Resto specifically, but the intellect that they had on their gear basically caused them to just have like an overflow of damage in cat, where they were just destroying everything with a couple of swipes. So you still have players that were able to utilize twink gear and have some fun with the twinked out, scaled up character within that content. So, but you'll still notice that the dungeons and the bosses and enemies do take a little bit longer to take down either way. However, with them technically making dungeons a little bit harder, and I really mean just a little bit, they are increasing the rewards from those dungeons. Technically, you will be able to get better gear from time walking dungeons, which is going to be adventure track. Previously it was explorer track, now it's adventure track, so I guess it's at least something, but it's not going to be anything amazing. I really think they should change this to at least veteran, because then it'll be more than worth your while. Because a lot of the gear that you can get from open world content in Dornagal and Kazalgar would actually be better than time walking dungeon gear. That being said though, they are also going to provide you more currency, specifically time war badges. And for the longest time, players have complained that it feels like whenever time walking weeks come around, outside of the main time walking quest line, or completing like the raid quest if one is available, there really isn't that much of an opportunity for you to get time warp badges on any one of your characters, which is super unfortunate. So it's good that they're actually increasing how many time warp badges you'll be able to get for every single dungeon one, with dungeons being technically harder, but it's more like a quote-unquote harder. They really are not that much more difficult, but you'll at least be able to get a decent bit extra of time warp badges, about 25 per run compared to like what 10 per run that you could get, which was very low. But this is going to mean that you'll be able to get a more steady supply of time warp badges to buy all of the new items that will be appearing in the time walking vendors. Now, another little convenience that's coming out as part of the patch 11.17 actually comes from the power progression of this update, as 11.17 brings in overcharged delves, which is a new form of content for delve enjoyers specifically. It comes with a quest line where you can get this powerful new belt that comes with these little bonuses that you can equip into it to give it different powers. The delves also will be a place where we find a lot of challenge with a bunch more Titanic themed enemies. Delves technically will be harder, but there's so many cool rewards. And one of those rewards that you'll be able to obtain from those overcharged delves are these discs. And these discs go into this disc belt that you can do a questline for, and they'll be kind of used to activate special powers within that belt. anything from being able to increase your character's secondary stats like Mastery Crit, Versa, or Haze, or provide you some overcharged damage and blasts or heals for your allies, or even a shield for yourself. And they recently buffed this belt in the current Sims right now for just about every single class. It looks like this belt is actually going to be a fairly sizable gain for every single spec out there, so you'll definitely want to go out to get the belt. However, having to go through all of those dungeons in order, or delves rather, and farming those discs for power-ups for every one of your ults would be a hassle. So they actually announced a couple of weeks ago that once you acquire one of those disc power-ups on one character for your belt, it becomes account-wide. So you all need to farm it up once on a main character, and then all of your ults, as soon as they get their own disc belt, which I'm sure there's probably going to be some sort of a skip for it, but the quest in itself to obtain it isn't even a lot long either, to be honest. But once your main acquires a new power-up for your belt, all of your ults gonna utilize it immediately, which is so good. Definitely one of those nice quality of life increases that they actually added on the PTR, and it's definitely going to be something that many of you will benefit from if you're looking to play alts as part of the 11.17 update. Now, another glyph that's being made available as part of this update, which actually was meant to be released in last patch 11.15, but it never actually got implemented into the game. We were able to data mine it, but nobody found a way to actually be able to obtain it until now, with the glyph of Strix, a unique glyph for marksmanship hunters, finally becoming available for players to earn, and it's something that can be easily purchased as a recipe from the Artisans Consortium Quartermaster in Dornogal, the main capital city of this expansion. This changes for marksmanship hunters, specifically the spotting eagle, which is like your not real pet, kind of like as a marksmanship hunter you don't necessarily play with a pet. But you do get this eagle that can swoop in for you to stun an enemy, or bloodlust your party, or even provide you protection with a Roar Sacrifice. It also is a pet that will swoop in to mark targets to increase the damage of your aim shot, which allows you to still have this like lone hunter type of playstyle while still keeping the utilities of having a pet without really having a pet out in the open. That eagle can now be swapped out to a snowy owl with this new glyph of the Strix. Now, you can actually see the animation and the change of the model of this pet just very lightly, and it's supposed to function for abilities like Spotter's Mark, whenever that procs on an enemy, whenever you use Pet Sacrifice, Intimidation Stun, or Harrier's Call. And right now, it does show up visually on Mark, as well as Stun very faintly, and really visibly during Lust. But it doesn't seem to work super well during Pet Sac, and even the sound animation for it, like the sounds that the Strix makes, the owl, versus the eagle is completely different. And right now it's still making an eagle sound during Pet Sac, but if you're somebody who, let's say, plays a Night Elf Hunter, and you really want to lean into the full Sentinel feel with your Mog, as well as with your character archetype, and swap out your eagle for an owl instead, very similar to Tyrande, then you can do so with this glyph that is now finally made available as part of the patch 11.17, which is like one of those little things that most people will miss out on. Another update of this patch actually comes from a holiday, one of the most players do miss out on and don't really mention all that often, but it's the Midsummer's Fire Festival, and it now has a couple of new items for you to collect. Every single time Midsummer's Fire Festival rolls around, 80 players that haven't obtained an item from a limited time dungeon that is available during this event, the Scythe, you'll actually notice that there's now two new versions of an updated Scythe, or rather the polearm, that is now farmable. There's the orange one, and then there's the blue one, which is really cool to see. But from the vendor itself, if you've already gotten all of the items, you'll now notice there's actually some new stuff on that vendor as well for you to collect. There's a helm, shoulder, as well as a belt piece, which is kind of part of this Midsummer Fire Festival, almost like a unique set. Kind of like similar to the class sets that we saw in Trading Post of the belt, shoulders, helm, but it doesn't have any of the other pieces. Although I actually really like some of those pieces. The helm in particular, I like. The big brazier on the top of the head is a little much, but the rest of the helm form, I'm actually a big fan of. There's also a shield as well as a back piece for you to earn, and every single one of those items during this holiday refresh will cost you about 350 burning blossoms, which is quite a decent bit to obtain, so you may want to use a couple of old characters in order to farm up all these items in order to obtain them, as there will be cosmetics that you'll be able to wear on any one of your characters. But it is a nice little holiday overall, definitely something worth engaging with, especially if you're looking to benefit from its bonus experience, which should end up overlapping at some point throughout the Turbulent Timeways as well. Another little update that most people will miss out on is the recuperate button, which is essentially a new way that players can actually use a unique ability to just recover the health bar without any consumables or any heals of your own. It just is a button that allows you to speed up your health recovery process as long as you're out of combat. It even plays out a unique animation where your character gets to make a quick campfire, cook up a quick meal. It has very much this Monster Hunter type of like feel about it, how you just like drop down a fire and just make yourself some food while recovering a little bit of health, and it's really nifty looking. And I think a lot of players forget that this is one of the more unique features that's coming out as part of 11.17 that's just going to be made available for every single class out there as like a general base ability. What's cool about this feature is it's obviously could be used in open world, like if let's say you're questing or doing world quests and you need a quick pick me up for a character, you just got out of combat, you can just sit down and do a quick recuperate so you can just continue questing or doing whatever you're doing. However, there's also possibilities for this in dungeons, as right now it is usable in dungeons. Imagine after like a really tough pull, maybe you had a wipe and you need like the healer to come back to your group. Everybody can sit down really quickly, recuperate really fast, maybe do one sketchy little pull while the healer is still making their way to the party. There's definitely a lot of potential and possibilities for this, especially. Or even imagine doing this in PvP, like having a rogue sneak up behind somebody in, I don't know, Lumbermill in Arathi Basin, try to see if you can snag a flag, and if you don't end up catching the objective, you can still try to see if you can vanish out, run outside of the range, and try to see if you can catch a quick recuperate in the bushes so that you can sneak back in and come back in immediately. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity for players to utilize this unique feature in order to help the characters recover just a little bit quicker, and it's one of those nice conveniences that I think is really underrated by many. Now, we all know that Turbulent Timeways is going to be a pretty major feature of 11.17, as it's going to be a way that players will be able to catch up their characters, whether it comes to XP or whether it comes to getting a bunch of gear, but then there's also a whole mount that is available for the rewards as well. And it's obviously one of the best looking mounts out there. I mean, Chrono Corsair is fantastic and it's rewarded during the Turbulent Timeway event. However, if let's say you missed out on previous Turbulent Timeways events, like maybe you just didn't play during that time and you missed out on a Time-Limited Busby or potentially even the Sandy Shale-Wing, both of those mounts that were made available during those Turbulent Timeways will still be purchasable all over again from any of the Time Walking vendors for 5,000 Time War badges. So even if you're working on Chrono Corsair and you're like, want to add an extra mount to your collection, but still wish you could go back and add some of the other ones from previous Turbulent Timeways, you still will be able to do so. The Busby, as well as Sandy Shale-Wing, if you haven't picked it up either, both of those will be still made available during Turbulent Timeways from any of the Time Walking vendors. Another nifty update that is coming out in 11.17 is more additions for the cooldown manager, with Blizzard really focusing on eventually removing the possibility of add-ons such as DBM or bigwigs or even weakers to some degree from functionality out of the game, as they're looking to transform the game completely, streamlining classes so you don't need to track every single debuff out there. As they're eventually looking to remove add-ons out of the game, they're also looking to improve some of the base UI features, and that comes into improving the cooldown manager even a little bit this time around. The cooldown manager, especially the essential cooldowns and the utility cooldowns portion of the cooldown manager, will now display more information than before for very, very specific abilities. And the two examples I had is like Shaman Totems, for example. You'll be able to see the duration of totems like Earthbind, Healing Stream, and every other totem once you place it. And then once the totem is gone, you'll see the cooldown for that totem. So if you're looking to track the duration, you'll be able to do that from the essential cooldowns overview window. For Warlocks, for example, you'll be able to track certain baseline skills, like track the duration of your Felguard, for example, the bonus summon one, your Tyrant, as well as your Charhound, or any of the other big demons that you summon for an extended periods of time. So for certain classes that use certain summons or even totems or sentry type of items, you'll be able to track a little bit more information from the base cooldown manager, which is at least one more step forward in terms of improving the cooldown manager. I think it is going to be very, very useful, and hopefully in the future updates we'll see even more customization capabilities for the cooldown manager, because I feel like it's almost there, it's almost perfect. I just wish I didn't have to see every single button as part of the essential cooldowns and utility cooldowns, just the important ones I really care about. So being able to customize those, I think would be a really good step to see in the next update, but this is at least one extra little addition as a step towards improving the general feature that is the cooldown manager. But with that, as always, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give it a like. I would very much appreciate it. Join our Discord community, especially if you want to keep up with the new updates with the patch 11.17, as we'll likely be putting out some guides, but also for any upcoming content like patch 11.2. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in the next one.